Well, hello there, visitors to and denizens of the YouTubeverse. I'm John, your social hermit, currently on secondment from the woods. And today I wanted to give a talk or a copy of a talk that I gave for the local ham radio AGM. And it is on something that's particularly useful when you're traveling, and that is ham radio hotspots. Or as I say, ham radio hotspots, a repeater in your pocket. So let's have a look. Okay, so a couple of caveats here. I am by no means an expert on digital internet linked radios. There's a lot of different systems and it's fairly complex. What I'm going to be talking about here is a fairly simplistic view of it. So there's both a downside, which is that what I might say, it might not be comprehensively accurate. There will be almost certainly some exceptions or variances to the general statements that I'm going to make. On the upside, without being an expert at this, I was very much able to get it to work and I found it very handy. So basically, anyone without prior digital radio experience can do it. Or, as I like to say, I knowed I could make it work. So let's start. What is a hotspot? Well, basically, it is a small, low power, portable, usually digital radio repeater. Uh, And what it does is it'll take either a VHF or UHF signal, most commonly UHF, and it swaps it back and forth to an acceptable internet transmissible digital radio protocol. So if we start over here on the left, you start off with a radio, and this could be using DMR or C4FM or D-Star or P25, or there's some other nodes. And there are some particular hotspots that will accept FM analog as an input as well. So your radio has an RF link, shown in orange, over to your hotspot, radio to the hotspot. This device takes that RF signal, puts it onto the internet, and depending on what kind of internet radio platform you're using, it would put this to something that you would probably call a talk group or a room or a reflector, something like that. And then someone somewhere else in the world either has a node or a repeater or a hotspot, and it's also connected to that same talk group, room, or reflector, and then it comes out again RF only back to their radio. And this goes both directions, so you can have a QSO. So who makes them? Well, a bunch of companies. Most common ones include Pi-Star, MMDVM, OpenSpot, ZumSpot, ClearNode I've listed there. They're not super common, but they do accept FM analog input, I believe. So these run the full gamut of do-it-yourself kind of systems where you really can get into the guts of it and you know what you're doing, to fully turnkey. And they have a variety of features and supported modes, or what I'll call tinker factor. The closer they are to a DIY type system, the more tinker factor or things you can fiddle with there are. Most of the turnkey ones are UHF, partially for form factor because the antennas are very small. They're digital RF, they're not analog FM RF, and very, very low power, under 100 milliwatts. So how many of these things are in use worldwide? Well, I can't tell you overall numbers, but not too long ago on a Sunday morning, I looked at the Brandmeister DMR network, which is a very popular worldwide digital radio communications protocol. And worldwide, they had just short of 18,000 attached hotspots, of which a little over 8,000 were in the US and just short of 500 were in Canada. Okay, so mostly my experience has been with a particular one called the OpenSpot 4. There's both a 4 and a 4 Pro. This is just the basic 4. And I'm going to talk the form factor and functions. Now, you can kind of see the size there. Looks kind of like a computer mouse. So this is very much on the turnkey side. There is not a lot of user input, and it has on the RF side input-output modes in C4FM, DMR, P25, NXDN, POXAG, I don't know what that is, and D-Star. And it is possible for it to transcode between these, so I can come in on C4FM and come out, let's say, P25. There is a asterisk there on D-Star. D-Star transcoding requires some additional hardware and maybe some licensing, and it's only available on the OpenSpot 4 Pro, which is a little more expensive. Now, I have Yaesu digital radio equipment, which is all C4 FM, so I didn't need to be able to transcode to D-Star, so I've just gone with a plain OpenSpot 4. Now, as you can see, it has no external antenna. It does have Wi-Fi for its internet connection. A couple of cool things. It carries an internal battery, which is good for 15 to 20 hours of continuous use, which is quite nice. And it's USB-C powered. You can either continuously power it off that or charge it. And as I said, it kind of size and factor of a slim computer mouse. So it has integrated control screens, which seem to be coming up very slowly here. There we go. And these integrated, let's go back here. I don't know why that's messing up. Technical difficulties. Control screens. Okay, so the OpenSpot 4 has integrated web server, and you can access this off any web-enabled device, which is on the same network it's on. So you can do this off your phone or a tablet or a computer. You just log into it, and you get all sorts of different status and configuration screens, which are dynamic. You can see what's going on. And what these screens are will change depending on the mode you have it in. So for instance, if you're in DMR output, on the computer side, on the digital side, it'll have some configurations that are specific for DMR, or the same would be same if you're using P25, it'll have any sort of specific configurations there. What about when you brought this into a new environment and your hotspot doesn't know the Wi-Fi? It has an access point mode, and you can put it into that, do a direct peer-to-peer connection. You go in, you tell it what Wi-Fi access point you wanted to access, provide the password, the SSID, and it will now connect through to that. And then you go back to that same network and you can control it that way. So that's how you do setup. It's quite straightforward. So what can and can't you do with one of these things? Well, what a hotspot can do is it can let you wander around your home using your handheld to converse with other amateur radio operators worldwide. So it's kind of like a voice over IP device, except you don't have to sit there at your computer and you can get quite some distance from the hotspot. Because of the transcoding, a hotspot can let you get into a different flavor or type of digital radio other than the one native to your handheld. So in my case, I said I had a C4 FM Yaesu digital. I have two of them actually. But I can attach to this and then essentially emulate a DMR radio with a DMR ID, and I can fully function on DMR networks. Importantly, for why I'm talking about it today, a hotspot can travel with you. So it gives you connectivity from your hotel room or your in-laws' house or your work camp or wherever it is you might happen to be. What can't it do? Well, it can't operate without an internet connection. If your interest in ham radio is about high resiliency backup communication methods, this is not a good one. If the internet goes down, doesn't work. However, keep in mind that internet can be provided whatever means, it doesn't care. I've used my cell phone as a portable Wi-Fi source in some occasions when I'm traveling, and it has no trouble at all going through that and now passing voice over IP via your radio with that. Also, big issue for some people, a really common digital radio network is, of course, the WIRES X system. Hotspots cannot access WIRES X, only for Yaesu hardware, some of the handhelds with the right cables, or an HRI 200, only Yaesu hardware can access WIRES X. And a hotspot can't directly access IRLP, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can still, in most cases, talk to people on those systems with a bridge. So what do you need to use one of these things? Well, you need a radio. Most choices will be if you have a UHF capable radio and it's digital. You could use a mobile one or a base station one, but really this is really designed around a handheld. The idea is to give you some mobility. You can walk around and still be connected. You need a hotspot, which has the same RF mode as your radio. So again, if I'm going to be using a D-star radio, I want a hotspot that's capable of a D-star input. If I'm going to use a Yaesu C4 FM radio, I want a hotspot with C4 FM as an input mode. You need an internet connection, as I just explained, and you may have to register for some services. So for instance, if I want to go on a DMR network, because my radio is not a DMR radio, it doesn't have a DMR ID. So I have to use the hotspot to apply for a DMR ID, which is tied to that hotspot. And now as my radio passes through there, that's the unique DMR ID that it carries with it. And you can use this now. Once you're connected, you can look things up and you can use this to connect to a single reflector repeater. So for instance, Kimberley, British Columbia, VE7 Delta Charlie X-ray is a local regional UHF repeater, but it has a DMR ID. It's on the Brandmeister network, and it's normally linked to talk group 30271, which is British Columbia. As an aside, Brandmeister talk groups work by a numeric sequence. 302 is a Canada code, 7 is ham radio region 7, like the 7 in your call sign, and 1 is the subgroup. So there's a 302, there's a 302, which is Canada-wide, 3027 is a British Columbia-wide chat room or group. 30271 is a BC subgroup, and there's also a 30272. And if you wanted other ones, they'd be 30273, 30274. I don't know if those exist, but you could create them. Now, in addition to going to a single network, you could also go to a massively bridged network. Let me move my face here so you can kind of see that. Now, a fantastic example of a massively bridged network is a US system called Sky-Hub Link based out of Colorado. And this has inputs for DMR, YSF, WiresX, P25, Echolink, D-Star, All-Star, IRLP, the sadly named Ham Shack hotline, which I sort of get flashbacks to bad 1980s videos. Call this number and some soft-focused woman with curly hair and candlelight will talk to you for $4 a minute, except it's ham radio. I'm assuming that's what Ham Shack hotline is like. M17, I don't know anything about. I think that is, something on Android phones that's being developed. And a lot of these repeaters actually on the Sky-Hub Link are pure analog repeaters, so people just plain analog mobile radios are getting in and coming in. What this network does is it bridges all of these, so somebody coming in on DMR comes out over all of those, or somebody coming in IRLP goes out all of those. So if you have a DMR radio and you want to talk to somebody who's got an IRLP link somewhere, you can both point to a bridge network like this and talk to each other. Now, unfortunately, of course, it's a big network. You're tying up a lot of network space. So, you want to keep these QSOs fairly short in general because there may be a lot of people trying to use this. Okay. Well, Sky-Hub Link in particular is mostly Colorado repeaters, but it does have some outliers. Saskatoon, Calgary, Spokane. I think there's a couple in Arizona. I think there's a couple in Wyoming. And it hosts some very interesting nets, by the way. If you are at all interested in this, you might want to look it up. There's an astronomy net on Tuesdays. The digital learning net actually is no longer there. That's now moved to a different network. It is on XLX 303 on Wednesday nights, but for years it was there. And when I made this slide, it was still there. And if you go to this skyhublink.com, it tells you about all the really cool things you can do. And this system and ones like it are very handy if you want to bridge between networks. You'll see over here all of these things that are WiresX, that green background with the red X. So I said that you can't use a hotspot to directly talk to WiresX, but using a bridge like this, I could do this. Somebody else could take a WiresX machine and point it into here, and now we have no trouble communicating with each other. And I've done that. I personally come into here via DMR, YSF, and WiresX, and I've talked out to DMR, YSF, WiresX, All-Star, IRLP, and analog on different times, and they've all worked. There may be a little bit of a delay, sometimes a second or two, but it works generally very well. How far can a hotspot reach? I said you can wander around with it. Well, UHF is line of sight short ranges, your mileage may vary depending on terrain, antennas, etc. But real life, this device, no external antennas. If I put the output power to 3 milliwatts, I routinely get about a 400-meter effective range to a handheld with a rubber duck, and that is through buildings and things like that. UHF generally gets through buildings pretty well. Last year I was in Victoria. I had this up in a high rise, and there was a pub about 350 meters away with a patio I like to sit on in the afternoon for beer sometimes. And I could take my radio and sit there and have no trouble at all being connected to wherever I want to be connected to. And that's at 3 milliwatts. This particular device will go up to 20 milliwatts, which still doesn't sound like much, but think about it, that's plus 8 dB. So yeah, you can get quite a ways with one of these. Are there any ways to extend the range? Well, yeah, I'm going to tell you one way which you could do it. Suppose you had a hotspot and you put it on a UHF digital out radio signal, and then you had a crossband repeater, which was digital capable in the same mode, and you put the crossband repeater input on the same frequency as the hotspot output, and then the crossband repeater then dumps out analog on the other side, and it'll be VHF. And now you could run this at 50 watts. Oh my gosh, and put a huge antenna on it. This works technically. I did a very quick test. I didn't run 50 watts. Strictly speaking, you need to check your jurisdiction. Strictly speaking, here, this isn't, I don't think, illegal. However, it's not really what was intended for hotspots. And if you look in the Radio Amateurs of Canada, it's in the footnotes of the 2-meter band plan, but it explicitly says, please don't put hotspots on 2-meter band. And if you absolutely have to put one on the 2-meter band, do not exceed 500 milliwatts. Now, 500 milliwatts with a decent antenna on 2 meters, it will actually get you a long ways. So that's all still kind of frowned upon, but considered kosher in some circumstances. Okay, but you could do that. However, I think this is it's a very simple approach. It's worth keeping in mind if you ever needed to set up a very fast analog to digital bridge someplace remotely. If you have something like an FTM 400 and an FTM 400 Yaesu mobile radio and a hotspot, you switch the two together, you put it in that crossband repeat mode, and you can have this up and running in about 60 seconds. Maybe some situations where that would be useful. Something you can do, which is kind of cool with, at least with this hotspot, is APRS connectivity, which is a packet reporting system. And so this can auto-upload GPS positions from your radio. If you have a radio which has a GPS module and it's connected to the hotspot, you can set it to where it passes that on through. Or you can manually upload your position from the hotspot itself. You can feed that out of your computer. Also, APRS text messaging is supported in the control software. So your radio may not have APRS, your digital radio. If you have a simple one like a Yaesu FT Fox Tango 70 Delta, it doesn't have that, but I can go into the control software and talk to an APRS equipped radio and chat messages back and forth. Where would you use that? Well, imagine you're traveling someplace and you've got a buddy way up in the woods somewhere, and this might be something you could do if you can't get a voice message through. You wanted to send a message to them, hey, there's a sale on moon bounce antennas at this place, and I know you want a moon bounce antenna, and you can let them know about it, and they can say, oh my gosh, buy me 2 because I'm gonna try to relay moon bounce or something. Anyways, again, potentially a useful thing in some situations. What about other kinds of messaging? Well, DMR radio supports a text chat message thing as well. And again, if you don't have a DMR radio, what it does is the control software, which is emulating that, enables you to go into your control software via that web interface, and you can do DMR SMS. And you can read, write, computer screening keyboard. And this also works with POXAG and DAPNet, which I know very little about, but I understand are more pager messaging type things, and you could do that. So maybe you wanted to run a restaurant paging system to let the servers know when something is ready. In theory, you could use a hotspot to do that, and a system like this to push messages out to their pager and say, table 17 ready for pickup. Um, so remember, you can't do wires X with this. One of the nice things with wires X is that your radio can remotely control a wires X server and from a long ways away, and you can reroute what it's connected to. Well, it turns out um, Yaesu radios have this dedicated wires X control mode. That's implemented in many hotspots, and certainly it is in the OpenSpot 4, if you're in either YSF or FCS modes. It'll handle both of those. Those are both C4FM modes, which are not directly supported by Yaesu, but which use the same protocols. And so if you're connected to the YSF network, which is a really big worldwide network, I like it a lot. I can have that hotspot set up. I can take my radio and remotely I can switch between YSF reflectors. And there's just pulled some random numbers there. A Sky Hub link that I talked about. 815 is an all Canada one. 46371, Zhengzhou, China. I lived there for a month at one time working in a hospital. 47040, Florida. I just kind of pulled some random numbers here. But your radio will now, you see this information on the radio, you'll see call signs of who's on the other end. The fancier Yaesu radios, like the FT2, FT3, and FT5s, which have on-screen menus and touchscreens, all of that is supported just like you're dealing with wires X. And you can store these 5-digit access numbers on the radio as if it were a wires X number. You can mix actual wires X numbers with YSF or FCS numbers, and the radio will actually tell you, even on the lower end ones like the FT70, it'll say this is a YSF code or this is a wires X code. So depending on what you're attached to, a wires X node or your hotspot, you can know which of those to enter. But bear in mind, all the YSF reflectors sound like and look like wires X rooms in many ways. They are not, and without a bridge, they don't talk to each other. So some final thoughts. Well, these things are cheap, relatively speaking. They're extremely portable, especially if you get these really turnkey small ones. And they allow you a cheap, easy way to access multiple different digital voice and messaging systems. My final thoughts are over here. You must choose between your radios and me. Just let me work this contest today, and then I will help you pack. So thanks for listening. I hope that was of some interest to any of you in the ham radio hobby who are thinking about dabbling a little bit in digital modes. Until next time, this is John, your social hermit, saying goodbye.